Do what thou wilt should be the whole of the law. This video is the fourth part of a reading of the paper Genealogy and Rectification of the Lesser Ritual of the Pentagram as a Site of Jewish-Christian-Neopagan Esoteric Intersectionality by Carrie Sealine. Section 4. Historical Critical Genealogy of the Lesser Ritual of the Pentagram. Turning now first to an investigation of the anecdotal or folkloric history of the Lesser Ritual of the Pentagram before proceeding to a recovery of its factual genealogy. We will begin with the myth of the Brotherhood of the Rosenkroits, or Rosenkreutz, and work forward. The Brotherhood was the imaginative product of the Tübingen Circle, a group of German Lutherans, including pastor and theologian Johannes Valentinus Andreas, 1586 to 1654, Paracelsian physician Tobias Hess, 1568 to 1614, and jurist and law professor Christoph Besselt, 1577 to 1638. Central to the formation of Protestant-derived Western esoteric traditions, the myth of Christian Rosenkreutz retroactively projects a Protestant Christian esoteric figure into the pre-Protestant 15th century. Within the 17th century, the Rosicrucian writings, the Fama Fraternitatis, Confessio Fraternitatis, and the Chemical Wedding of Christian Rosenkreutz in the year 1459 blend Renaissance Neoplatonism and Baroque alchemy in the figure of Christian Rosenkreutz, an alchemically perfected allegory for the crucified Redeemer Jesus Christ as understood from a broadly Lutheran perspective. This early modern Protestant allegorical fantasy distances itself from Catholic orthodoxy, while also creating an esoteric alternative to Luther's purified exoteric church. Rosicrucianism posits the revelation of the hidden roots of an esoteric spirituality disclosed by Martin Luther's purifying Reformation. The Lesser Ritual of the Pentagram does not appear in these texts, but the symbolism of the Golden Dawn's Kabbalistic Cross, a golden cross with a five-petaled red rose at its center, is associated with the Rosicrucian movement. The emblem is an adaptation of Martin Luther's coat of arms and frequently printed on his pamphlets. As might be expected in a Lutheran environment, no overtly Jewish elements appear in the Rosicrucian corpus, but evidence of the appropriation of Jewish and Islamic magical and esoteric knowledge persists in the traces left by their erasure. The fictional biography of Christian Rosenkreutz includes extensive travels through the Middle East and Mediterranean basin on a quest for the knowledge and wisdom of the East. There he learns the wisdom from the Sabians in Arabia and studies, presumably, Jewish magic and Kabbalah in Fez. All these Muslim and Jewish holy men share their knowledge freely with the German holy man. In gathering all of the world's arcane knowledge and adding to it his own, Rosenkreutz develops a pan-Sophie that includes the universal truths of all world esoteric traditions, a meta-religion that transcends and thus supersedes any particular one of them. The creators of Christian Rosenkreutz were sympathetic to Paracelsus, 1493 to 1527, whose transmission of originally Islamic alchemy, medicine, and mathematics was not well received by the church or scientific authorities of his time. Rosenkreutz's life and travels echo those of Paracelsus, and the Fama Fraternitatis explicitly names Paracelsus as one of many prophets who go unheeded in dark times. According to Nicholas Goodrick Clark, the, quote, life and travels of this legendary figure relate the Pan-Sophie of the Fama to a mythographic account of the earlier transmission of Islamic and Jewish learning in the Latin West and its subsequent penetration of Europe as a subcultural Paracelsian tradition, unquote. Pointing to Paracelsus as a source for Jewish and Arabic material, while incorporating those traditions into a universalist Christian, but not Catholic, faith, Rosenkreutz's creators continued the erasure of the original Jewish and Muslim sources. This obscures the facts that Christoph Besselt knew Hebrew and Arabic, was well read in Hermetic and mystical thought, and, according to Goodrick Clark, possessed a library of 4,000 volumes of theology, Kabbalah, philosophy, medicine, and history. According to the legend recounted in the Fama, published in 1614, the Brotherhood of the Rosy Cross, founded by Christian Rosenkreutz, was a secret organization until the burial vault of its founder was discovered in 1604, complete with Rosenkreutz' uncorrupted body and the Book of All Knowledge, Pan-Sophie. The legend of the Brotherhood spread throughout Europe and was incorporated into Freemasonry in the 18th century. Therefore, late 19th century Masonic Rosicrucians, such as the founders of the Golden Dawn, do not represent an unbroken chain of secret initiates, but rather indicate a revival of interest in Neoplatonic spirituality, alchemy, and ceremonial magic in the Victorian era. Over 200 years after the publication of the Fama Fraternitatis, Eliphas Levi, the Hebraicized pseudonym of French esotericist and magician Alphonse Louis Constant, a renegade abbé and disappointed socialist revolutionary, renounced Catholicism in favor of magical occult science sometime in the 1850s. Gershom Scholem, not generally given to praise of Christian Kabbalists and certainly having an ideological axe to grind, characterized Levi's use of Judaic Kabbalistic materials as, quote, brilliant misunderstandings and misrepresentations, unquote. It is in the intersection of Levi's novel readings of Jewish Kabbalah and the Greek theory of the four elements that we can find the historical origin of the lesser ritual of the pentagram and begin to recover the elided Jewish source material, which ties the ritual to esoteric practices of the Hellenistic era. In his major work, Transcendental Magic, Eliphas Levi describes the magical operation of the conjuration of the four. This discussion contains most of the material that constitutes the Golden Dawn's lesser ritual of the pentagram. Transcendental Magic covers in great detail and with charming style the aspects of magic found in the magical and mystical texts Levi was familiar with, including parts of the Zohar and other Kabbalistic texts then available in Latin, such as Johannes Reuchlin's De Arte Kabbalistica, Nor von Rosenroth's Kabbalah Denudata, and Paulus Rhesius's Porte Lucis, itself a translation of Joseph Gicatilla's Shai Ora, Gates of Light. Although Levi is thought to have had some Hebrew as well as Latin and Greek as part of his ecclesiastical education, his translator and Golden Dawn initiate A.E. Waite said, quote, it would be an error to suppose that any of his published works exhibit linguistic attainments, more especially in that language, Hebrew, unquote. Levi's conjuration of the four allows the magician, quote, to govern elementary spirits and thus become king of the occult elements, unquote, once they have successfully negotiated the physical ordeals presented by each element. These might include dangerous exposure to fire or, quote, crossing an abyss by means of a trunk of a tree or a plank, scaling a perpendicular mountain during a storm, swimming through a dangerous whirlpool or cataract, unquote. Mastery of the elements by gaining control of the gnomes, earth, undines, water, salamanders, fire, and sylphs, air, that govern them is the, quote, indispensable preliminary of all magical operations, unquote. In addition to the specific language of invocation or exorcism for each element, the ritual includes making the sign of the Kabbalistic cross upon one's body at the beginning and conclusion of the conjuration. According to Levi, the cross was not the exclusive property of Christians, but was an ancient symbol representing, quote, the oppositions and tetratic equilibrium of the elements, unquote. The magician marks this cross upon their forehead, breast, and shoulders while reciting the occult versicle of the Lord's Prayer, that is the concluding phrase of Matthew 6:13 in the Greek Bible of the Eastern Orthodox Church, quote, for the kingdom, basileia, and the power, dynamis, and the glory, doxa, are yours forever, aeonas. Amen. Unquote. Matthew chapter 6, verse 13 may have been truly a cult for Levi, revealed in comparative readings of the Greek and Latin Bibles, as it is not preserved in the Roman Catholic Vulgate Bible. William Tyndale, however, translating the Bible into English from Hebrew and Greek sources in the 16th century, does preserve it. Known as the doxology, from doxa or glory, this verse concludes the Lord's Prayer, Luke chapter 11, verses 2 to 4, and Matthew chapter 6, verses 9 to 13, in the Anglican Common Book of Prayer and the later King James Bible from 1611, as well as the earlier Tyndale translation of the Bible from 1526, which renders it, quote, "For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen," unquote. It does not become part of the Roman Catholic Rite until 1969. As we shall see below, this versicle makes intertextual reference to 1 Chronicles chapter 29, verse 11, a favorite recurring speculative motif in the Zohar. It was likely familiar to Levi through von Rosenkreutz. Levi presents the conjuration as an ancient ritual, which he claims was originally conducted and transmitted in 2 versions, though he provides only one, intended for priests and initiates in his writings. Quote, "For example, the initiate said, raising his right hand to his forehead, 'For thine,' then added 'is,' and continuing as he brought down his hand to his breast, 'the kingdom,' then to his left shoulder, 'the justice,' afterwards to the right shoulder, 'and the mercy,' then clasping his hands he added, 'in the generating ages, tibi sunt malkuth et gebera et hesed per aeonis,' a sign of the cross which is absolutely and magnificently Kabbalistic, which the profanations of Gnosticism have lost completely to the official and militant church," unquote. In this paragraph, we see the reappearance of the erased Jewish biblical intertext in Levi's rendering of Matthew's occult Greek versicle as the magical phrase, "Tibi sunt malkut et gebera et hesed per aeonis," yours are the kingdom and the power and glory forever. Despite its garbled trilingual vocabulary, the phrase is neither Latin, nor Hebrew, nor Greek, but a magical incantation composed of words of power from all of these divine languages of creation, a literal speaking in tongues. Kabbalistically speaking, the Hebrew Malkut, kingdom, Geburah, power, and Hesed, mercy, are 3 of the 10 Sephirot, or divine emanations of the Zoharic tree of life. Tibi sunt, yours are, and per aeonis, through the generating ages, are schoolboy, not scholarly versions of the languages of St. Jerome or the author of Matthew. Compared below are Levi's incantation of the Kabbalistic Cross with the Hebrew of 1 Chronicles 29:11, St. Jerome's Latin translation of that verse, along with the Greek of Matthew 6:11 with the English rendering of William Tyndale's 1525 Common Era translation. First, the Hebrew of 1 Chronicles 29:11. Laha Adonai, ha Gedulah, vaha Gevurah, vaha Tiferet, vaha Netzach, vaha Hod. Kiko Bashamayim, uva Aretz, laha Adonai, ha Mamlaka, viha Mitnese, lahol Larosh. Next, St. Jerome's Latin translation of 1 Chronicles 29:11. Tua est Domine, magnificentia, et potentia, et gloria, atque victoria, et tibi laus, cunta enim quae in caelio sunt et in terra tua sunt, tuum Domine regnum, et tu es super omnes principes. Matthew 6:11. Hote su estin he basilie, kai he dynamis, kai he doxa, eis tus aeonis. Amen. William Tyndale's English translation of Matthew 6:13. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen. Rendered by Eliphas Levi, Tibi sunt malkut et gebura et hesed perionis. Amen. St. Jerome's tua est, yours is the proper construction of Levi's tibi sunt, from which it differs in case, nominative, not dative, and number of the verb, singular, not plural, and use of the pronoun you, too, in its dative form tibi, instead of the adjective tua or yours. Tua modifies the singular feminine nouns magnificentia, potentia, gloria, and victoria. The phrase perionis, forever, is a Greek-Latin mashup. As for the Hebrew, 1 Chronicles 29:11 lists 7 divine qualities or attributes which Moses de Leon will reinterpret in the 13th century as the lower 7 sephirot on the tree of life, namely mercy, power, glory, victory, splendor, the blueprint of creation, and kingship. Levi, whose English and Greek literate Christian readers will understand the intertextual reference to Matthew, might not associate the intertextual reference of Matthew to the Hebrew Scriptures. 1 Chronicles 29:10-11 is the prayer that King David offers to the Judean God as he announces and inaugurates the construction of his Jerusalem temple. In Matthew, in a textual move meaningful to early Christians and others familiar with the Hebrew Scriptures, David's words are truncated and put into Jesus' mouth. In this way, Jesus' messianic status is affirmed through his correspondence to King David, and his magical prowess is suggested through the recitation of the list of powers attributed to the Hebrew God to be housed in the future temple. Interpreted in a Christological frame, the Zohar's frequent repetition of 1 Chronicles 29:10-11 points to both Hebrew and Christian scriptures. For Levi, Jesus is the foundation of the occult as well as the exoteric church. The Hebrew lexicon of the 3 qualities or sephirot of Levi's Kabbalistic Cross, Malkut, kingdom, Geburah, power, and Hesed, mercy, reflect a Zoharic origin and are not scriptural, which uses Mamlaka, government, instead of Malkut, kingdom, and Gedulah, greatness, instead of Hesed, merciful loving kindness. It would seem that Levi comes to the doxology by way of the Zohar. Based on the ideas developed by Levi for his ritual conjuration of the 4, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn was responsible for developing the lesser ritual of the Pentagram into the ritual we use today. According to the originating mythology of the Golden Dawn, rituals and ceremonies were held to be the creative work of these secret chiefs, spiritual masters with whom Westcott, Woodman, and Mathers were in conversation. However, the real chiefs were the 3 founders themselves. It may be safe to assume that the lesser ritual of the Pentagram was scribed by one or another or all of them. All of the men, furthermore, were Rosicrucians and Freemasons. Freemasonic initiatory symbolism relates to the construction of the Jerusalem temple and the assassination of Master Mason Hiram, and has an initiatory grade of the Rosenkroits. Of the 3 Golden Dawn secret chiefs, Mathers was a virtuistic and creative ritualist, translator, and autodidact scholar of the esoteric, whose poverty and relocation to Paris in 1891, with the financial assistance of Annie Horniman, created tensions within the order that resulted in his disputed expulsion in 1900, and the subsequent schism of the Golden Dawn into multiple successor orders. With his wife Moina, sister of the philosopher Henry Bergson, Mathers continued as leader of the Alpha et Omega and his Ahathor temple in France, which his widow carried on after his death in 1918. Meanwhile, the order also continued in England into the 1930s, reorganized as the Stella Matutina. Whether the lesser ritual of the Pentagram was written by Mathers or not, it was part of the original Golden Dawn's ritual repertoire. Aleister Crowley, for example, received it upon his neophyte initiation in 1898. Having taken Mather's side in the Golden Dawn schism, Crowley broke with the Golden Dawn in 1900. He continued to use the lesser ritual of the Pentagram, as well as techniques from many varied sources, and incorporated into Thelema as a foundational tool for any serious magical aspirant. Israel Regardie, 1907 to 1985, like Crowley before him, acquired the lesser ritual of the pentagram upon his 1934 neophyte initiation into the Stella Matutina, although he was certainly already familiar with Crowley's use of the ritual. A Rosicrucian and magical adept, Regardie had also worked as Crowley's personal secretary in 1928, by which time Crowley's own magical system of Thelema was well developed and in regular practice, informing Regardie's compilation and publication of the rituals, ceremonies, and grade work of the second generation Stella Matutina. In a typically hyperbolic pronouncement, Aleister Crowley wrote, quote, "Those who regard this ritual as a mere device to invoke or banish spirits are unworthy to possess it. Properly understood, it is the medicine of metals and the stone of the wise." Unquote. Certainly, Crowley here is indulging in a bit of polemic against the Golden Dawn, which tended to play down the possibilities open to the neophyte. Contrast Crowley's attitude with Regardie's, who transmits normative Golden Dawn doctrine, when he writes, quote, "The lesser ritual of the pentagram is only of use in general and unimportant invocations. Its use is permitted to the outer order that neophytes may have protection against opposing forces, and also that they may form some idea of how to attract and to come into communication with spiritual and invisible beings." Unquote. It would seem that once the initiate has progressed from the outer to the inner order of the Golden Dawn, the occult power of the lesser ritual of the pentagram is revealed, whereas in Crowley's Thelemic pedagogy, the neophyte is made aware from the start of the ritual's enormous potential, so that it may be consciously performed with proper awe and respectful reverence. Love is the law, love under will.